Daniel Reyes had buried his idea of love so deep at 34 that he'd stopped digging for it. Then his sister dragged him to a dinner party, and across the room walked a woman the whole table couldn't stop whispering about for all the wrong reasons. Her name was Isabel Marchetti. So, billionaire. And in that moment, the loneliest-looking person in the building. What Daniel did next silenced the table. What Isabel admitted afterward broke something open in her she'd spent years keeping shut. He arrived at the restaurant 2 minutes early because lateness felt disrespectful, even for a dinner he hadn't wanted to attend. He'd said no 3 times. His sister Renee had asked on a Tuesday, then again with his niece's help. His daughter Mia, 7 years old, had apparently been consulted behind his back and had cheerfully sold him out. You could go, she'd told him, hugging her stuffed fox, Winston. Aunt Renee asked me first. So he went. One dinner. That was the deal he made with himself on the sidewalk, watching a valet take someone's keys. Inside, a private room held a table for 8. Renee's husband Tom met him at the door with the forced ease of a man who'd been told not to make it weird and was making it weird anyway. Around the table, a couple Daniel barely knew, a man named Grant who kept checking a watch that cost more than Daniel's truck, and Grant's girlfriend, deep in a story about Portofino that Daniel had stopped following. The seat beside him was empty. She's running a little late, Renee said, sliding into her chair. Isabel. She's brilliant, Daniel. Funny, too, in a way she doesn't let many people see. He picked up the menu and tried to look like a man who was comfortable. He wasn't uncomfortable meeting someone new. What he was uncomfortable with, had been quietly uncomfortable with for 3 years, was the specific mix of hope and disappointment that came from being evaluated across a dinner table. He'd done this twice before. Both ended politely after a few dates, and both times he'd sat afterward in his truck in his apartment lot, wondering how his life had gotten so small. He was 34. He ran his own contracting business, mostly commercial renovations, not glamorous but honest work. He had a daughter who'd claimed every surface of his apartment with drawings and rock collections he didn't fully understand. He had a good life. He knew it was good. He just sometimes sat in parking lots at night and noticed how quiet it was. He was on his second glass of water when the door opened behind him and the room did the thing rooms do, a small recalibration, an exchanged glance nobody meant to be seen making. Isabel Marchetti walked in like a woman who'd learned long ago that the only way into a room already judging her was to walk in like she owned the building. She was tall, dark-haired, dressed in deep green, expensive in the way things are when chosen by someone with real taste, not just money. She finished a text before looking up, and when she did, her face was composed, polished, carefully neutral. She was a large woman. That was simply a fact, not a tragedy. And in the 3 seconds it took her to cross to the table, Daniel watched the room make its small, cruel adjustments. Grant's girlfriend's glance, Grant straightening slightly, Tom's flicker toward his wife. Daniel saw none of that reflected in Isabel. He saw a woman with her shoulders back, her chin level, her face arranged in absolute control. And underneath it, in the pressure of her thumb against her phone case, something that looked less like confidence and more like exhaustion that had been rehearsed into invisibility. Isabel, Renee said warmly, so glad you made it. Traffic on the parkway. I should have taken the tunnel. Her voice was low, unhurried. She turned to Daniel as he stood. His mother had raised him to stand for people, and something quick crossed her eyes, gone before he could name it. Daniel Reyes. Isabel Marchetti. Sorry I kept everyone waiting. You didn't. 7:31. That's basically on time. A real look. I appreciate a man who tracks the clock. Occupational habit. I run job sites. If I say a project takes 6 weeks, and it takes 6 weeks, that's the whole job. Something moved across her face. The architecture of a smile she hadn't quite allowed. That sounds satisfying. It is. I've gotten used to being right quietly. This time she did smile, brief and real, and reached for her water glass like she needed something to do with her hands. Dinner unfolded slowly, the usual collage of real estate and travel talk. Isabel was sharp in the specific way people get sharp when they've had to work twice as hard to be taken seriously. Precise, unshowy, exact. Somewhere around the third course, Grant decided to be interesting. Marchetti Holdings, That's the firm that restructured the Delgado portfolio, right? Marchetti Capital, she corrected without edge. Yes, that was a difficult call. Worth the criticism it got? The portfolio returned well the following year. Mathematically, yes. You don't seem like someone who loses sleep over criticism. Ich sleepfine. I've had practice. Grant smiled the smile of a man deflected and deciding whether to try again. He tried again. I imagine, in your position, people make a lot of assumptions about you. Everyone deals with that. Sure, but a vague gesture that gestured at everything and nothing. In a room like this, you'd stand out for more than one reason. That must come with interesting dynamics. The table held its breath. Daniel set down his fork. I think, he said, conversational, not confrontational. The finance crowd stands out for plenty of reasons. Isabel's clearly the most qualified person here to talk about that world, which is probably why you're asking her. He picked his fork back up. It was a compliment, I'm sure. Silence. Renee looked at her wine glass. Isabel looked at Daniel. And it wasn't gratitude exactly. Something closer to surprise that had forgotten how to be suspicious. So, she said finally, steering the table back with practiced ease, you built the Wren Street parking structure? Consulted on the foundation. Took 2 years longer than it should have. I know. Marchetti Capital holds bonds tied to that corridor. Then you know more about load specs than you ever wanted to. In my experience, she said, that's usually both impressive and depressing. By the third hour, the table had scattered into smaller conversations, and Daniel and Isabel had turned, without deciding to, toward each other. She told him, without meaning to, but telling him anyway, about starting her firm at 23 with a small trust fund and 2 analysts she'd had to convince to believe in her. About sleeping 4 hours a night. About being the youngest person in every room, and how that was different when you also looked like her. About learning to walk in pre-armored, which was useful and exhausting. Maybe the editing gets tiring too, he said. Yes, she said quietly. It does. He told her about his divorce. Married young, grown into different people, no villain in it. Just 2 people who stopped fitting. I miss having someone to tell the small stuff to, he admitted. Mia said something hilarious yesterday, and I told a guy at the hardware store because there was nobody else. What did she say? That her stuffed fox, Winston, wants to be a marine biologist, but he's afraid of deep water, so he's still working through it. Isabel laughed, a real one, unguarded, and this time she didn't cover it. Near the end of the night, Grant tried once more, lighter, but landing lower, a comment about how production formal wear must be for her. A short silence. Isabel's hand flattened slightly on the table. You know what I've noticed? Daniel said, easy, unhurried. You keep wrapping the same comment in different paper. Maybe you think that's subtle. It's not. It's gotten old. He paused. You've missed what's actually interesting about the person next to you. That's your loss, not hers. Grant left 20 minutes later. Outside, waiting for cars, Isabel said quietly, you didn't have to do that. I know. I'm used to it. I know that too. Being used to something doesn't mean you should have to be. She held his gaze a long moment. Okay, she said finally. Not thank you. Something more complicated. Like accepting a truth she'd been arguing against for a long time. He texted 3 days later. Winston's leaning toward marine biology after all. Building his confidence with a kiddie pool. She replied within the hour. Strong developmental strategy. Tell him I approve. Coffee, he wrote, then deleted it, then sent it anyway. I don't usually say yes to this, she wrote back. Saturday. There's a place on Delaney Street. 10 o'clock. Don't be late. They met most Saturdays after that. A cramped coffee shop with 4 outdoor tables, then a taco place with a jukebox that played on No Logic. He learned she got sharper, not quieter, when nervous. She learned he went silent when thinking hard, turning his cup in slow rotations. They didn't talk about the gap between their lives, his modest apartment and second-hand truck, her penthouse and car service, but it sat between them like weather. His sister called him about it in November. She mentioned you 4 times in one conversation, Renee said, and then went quiet, which for Isabel means she's scared. She's had a rough time. Daniel, men who thought it was funny to make her feel small. I don't think you're that. I just needed to say it out loud. He stood at his stove a long time after that call, something dull and quiet moving through him that wasn't quite anger. That night, he texted Isabel. Winston wants to know if you're going to law school with him or biology. He's conflicted about your future together. Tell him I've decided, she wrote back. I'm staying the course. Also, I find I'm enjoying this more than most things I do on a Thursday. Same, he wrote. Mia met her in December at a small aquarium. Mia's current obsession after a brief and intense rock phase. Isabel had been nervous in a way she wasn't used to being nervous about boardrooms full of investors, but was about a 7-year-old. I'm Mia, the girl said, looking up with uncomplicated appraisal. Dad says you know about money. Daniel closed his eyes. I know some things about it, Isabel said. Do fish have money value? Some fish are worth a lot. Actually, rare species. Mia considered this with the gravity it deserved, then took Isabel's hand and led her toward the jellyfish tank. About 40 minutes in, watching the moon jellies drift, Mia said, with the unembarrassed observation of a child noting a fact, you're really big. Isabel went still for half a second. I am, she said simply. It's a good thing to be. Actually takes up more space. Like a whale, Mia said, and moved on to the seahorses without further comment. Daniel caught Isabel's eye over his daughter's head. The stillness was gone, replaced by something lighter. Afterward, near a tank of moon jellies, Isabel said, without looking at him, I didn't expect this. Any of it. It felt like something I've been missing the shape of, without knowing it was a shape. Okay, he said quietly, giving her word back to her. The trouble came from a direction neither of them was watching. A financial journalist working a profile piece had been fed a line by a former employee Isabel had let go 8 months earlier, a man named Curtis Bellamy, terminated for cause after 3 chances to correct his performance, given a severance more generous than required. He'd apparently decided her decency was a weakness to exploit. His comment to the journalist wasn't really about the company. It was about Isabel's weight, her judgment, and, pointedly, that she'd recently been seen around town with someone clearly out of her league. Financially, the journalist clarified, not wanting to be unclear about the cruelty. The journalist wasn't running it. She called only as a courtesy, which, in that industry, was itself a kind of warning. Isabel sat in her coat on her couch for 20 minutes before taking it off. She didn't call Daniel that night. She called her therapist at 8 the next morning. Someone's trying to make it look like he has an angle, she told Dr. Ferris. And I don't know if I have the right to make him absorb that. Is that his decision to make or yours? She sat with that question all morning, then called Daniel and asked him to come over, the first time she'd ever asked that. He said yes immediately. She told him everything on her couch, 22 floors above the city. When she finished, she said, I called you to give you the information and let you decide, not to manage your reaction. You have a daughter, he said slowly. I mean, you have a kid. He caught himself, recalibrated. I mean, I have Mia. I have a life. If being with you pulls that into someone's headline, that's a cost you didn't sign me up for, and I'm not sure it's fair to hand it to me. No, Daniel said, calm. You were trying to give yourself a graceful exit in case you needed one. That's not. Who made this decision for you? The one where you assess the cost and then hand me the paperwork? Silence. I'm scared, she admitted finally, that you'll do the math and it won't add up. I've been doing the math since October, he said. I keep getting the same number. Whatever it costs, it's worth it. You're infuriating, she said. Because you mean it. I do. She exhaled, long and slow. Okay, she said. Its fullest meaning. Her attorney sent a letter. Bellamy backed down within a week. Isabel told Daniel the whole thing, including the part where her first instinct had been to make it quietly disappear, the way she always had. The pattern of absorbing the cost yourself, her therapist had told her, is a habit. It's not the same as the right choice. You keep briefing me, Daniel told her one night on the phone. Like I need to be ready for the field. I'm with you. Not next to you with an exit. With you. I'm still learning, she said. It cost her something to say it. She said it anyway. The Alden Literacy Gala in April was an event Isabel had attended for years, first as a donor, then on the advisory board. She hadn't planned to bring Daniel. Not because she didn't want him there, but because she knew exactly what kind of room it was, photographed, socially charged, populated by people whose favorite sport was noticing. Mia made the decision for her. "Are you bringing Dad to the fancy party?" she asked one evening, doing homework at Daniel's kitchen table while Isabel sat across from her, having quietly become furniture in the apartment. Not intrusive, just there. "I'm going to gala," Isabel said carefully, "for a literacy foundation. Dad reads to me every night. You should bring him. Fancy parties are better with someone." Isabel asked him that evening, standing in his kitchen while he did dishes. "I want you to come," she said. "Not if you feel obligated. I want you there." "Okay. It'll be photographed. People will notice." "Do you care?" he asked. "I care that they'll say something about you. I stopped caring what they say about me a long time ago." "Then they do, and we deal with it," he said. "I'm not made of glass, Isabel." He wore his one good suit, dark navy. She wore deep blue, tailored entirely herself. Cameras met them at the door. His hand found the small of her back. Not possessive, just present. She didn't lean away. The first comment came within 30 minutes, from a philanthropy board member named Corinne Alsop, who looked at Daniel with performed curiosity. "I didn't know you were bringing someone, Isabel. I didn't announce it. And you are?" "Daniel Reyes. Contractor. How interesting." The syllable carried weight. "Lovely to have someone here supporting you." Isabel's hand closed briefly around her dress fabric. Later, a finance man named Whitfield asked Daniel, with genuine thoughtlessness, "So how did you two meet?" "Through her charity work." The implication being that the only logical frame for Daniel's presence was as a beneficiary, not a choice. "Mutual friends," Daniel said mildly. "Dinner party in October. And you're in construction." "Important work?" Whitfield said, recalibrating slightly. "It is," Daniel agreed. A journalist named Priya Alawalia sat beside him during dinner and asked, notebook in hand, what it was like being with someone at Isabel's level. He considered her question honestly. "It's strange sometimes. Not the way people assume. I don't feel like a charity case. It's more that the world keeps trying to fit a frame around it that doesn't match. Like there has to be an angle. There isn't one. It's just two people who met at dinner and actually liked each other." He glanced across the room, where Isabel was in conversation, composed exactly right. "She's the most capable person I've ever met. And people who make hard things look easy, everyone stops checking if they're okay. I just think she deserves someone paying attention." The moment came near the end of the night, from 3 people by the bar Daniel hadn't been tracking. He caught it in fragments. The specific careless confidence of people who'd had enough to drink to loosen the gap between thinking and saying. Not sure what the angle is, but there's clearly one. Men don't just. Isabel's pace didn't break. Her hand closed at her side. Daniel stopped walking. She turned back. Her face said don't. He understood the math behind it and walked the 3 steps back anyway. "I heard you," he said. "Not raised. Just direct. There's no angle. I'm here because she asked me. I'm with her because she's extraordinary and honest, and because I'm better around her than I am without her. I know that doesn't fit the frame you had ready. I'm not apologizing for it." He paused. "And the company you're all so impressed by. She built it herself at 23, while people exactly like you told her she couldn't. Maybe don't compliment her and diminish her in the same breath." He walked back to Isabel. Her face was open in a way he'd only seen once before, at the aquarium, undefended, raw. "Nobody has ever done that," she said, voice unsteady. "In 8 years. Not once." "You don't have to keep walking," he said. Something in her settled. Not shut down, but landed the way weather finally makes contact with ground. "I love you," she said. The words came out like they'd been held behind a door for a long time. "I know," he said softly. "That wasn't calculated." "I know it wasn't. I love you too. Since December, probably." "The aquarium. Mia said you were like a whale, and you didn't flinch. I thought, that's the one." She laughed despite herself. "You have terrible timing." "I really do. In front of the bar." "Yes." She looked at him for a long moment. No calculation, no accounting. "Okay," she said. They're word by now. He took her hand. They weren't performing for the room. Just a man taking a woman's hand, because she was the person he'd chosen. The photograph that ran in the magazine 2 weeks later showed none of the frames the room had tried to force onto them. Not an angle, not a gap, not a scandal. Just two people near a bar, her hand in his, the room in motion around them, the two of them still. Mia's rock collection eventually gave way to a small tank of her own, a compromise reached after extensive negotiation. Isabel kept her apartment. She wasn't going anywhere, and neither was Daniel. His business was rooted here, Mia's school was here. But he learned the shortcut through the tunnel that saved 15 minutes and stopped thinking of it as a route. Mia told her second-grade class, months later, that she had two homes now, said with the plain matter-of-factness of a child for whom that was simply a fact, like brown eyes or a fox named Winston. Her teacher wrote in a report, Mia appears to have a stable and loving home environment. Daniel read that sentence twice. Renee took full credit at every family dinner. I did this, she'd say, raising her glass, and Tom would say, you say that every time, and she'd say, because it's still true every time. Love, Daniel had come to understand, wasn't blind. Real love saw everything. The armor and the exhaustion underneath it. The way Isabel went quiet when she wasn't okay and was too proud to say so. And stayed anyway. Not despite what it saw. Because of it. And Isabel learned that the ledger she'd kept since she was 23, tallying what she owed the room, what the room owed her, had been a habit, not a truth. She hadn't stopped being careful. She'd just stopped running the calculation on him. Driving home that night, the city lights sliding past the window, his hand still in hers, she thought about a woman she used to be who would have spent this exact drive doing the accounting. Too much, not enough, too loud, too big. She wasn't doing that tonight. She turned from the window and found him already looking at her. What? She said. Nothing, he said. Just looking. She squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. The car moved on into the night. And everything that was going to be difficult still would be. And everything that was already worth it, quietly, completely was.